Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, let's set the scene. It's November 1942. You're deep in the western desert, North Africa. Now, imagine a German reconnaissance unit. They're used to their own vehicles, precisely engineered, maybe a bit complicated. Then they stumble across this thing. A captured American Willys MB Jeep. Looks kind of beat up, dusty, almost crude. What happened next wasn't really about combat. It was this quiet, almost professional moment of shock for the Wehrmacht mechanics who were told, figure this thing out.
Yeah, their initial job was pretty straightforward. Just, can we use this thing? Is it any good? But what they found when they started digging in, just opening the hood, doing a basic look over, well, it shook their whole belief system. This fundamental faith they had in German engineering superiority. This little Jeep started to poke holes in it. It became this, preview of how the war was going to turn out materially. It showed a real flaw in their whole approach to building things.
Right. And that's the core of our deep dive today, isn't it?
Yeah.
How this simple, almost basic Jeep became this huge symbol, a symbol of the massive difference between the German way chasing perfection, absolute precision, and the American philosophy, which was all about simplicity, yeah, but also speed and just overwhelming numbers, massive production capacity.
Exactly. And the irony, the real twist, is that this tough lesson they learned from the Jeep, it actually helped lay the groundwork for rebuilding German industry after the war.
It's fascinating. So let's start with that first inspection. You said it wasn't like a lightning bolt moment for the mechanics.
No, the sources suggest it was more gradual. One guy later called it a creeping understanding. They looked at it, and it just didn't compute with their worldview at first.
So they popped the hood was the first thing that hits them, not some super advanced engine.
Yeah, not at all. It was the engine, yeah, the 134 cubic inch God Devil, only 60 horsepower. Not impressive on paper by German standards. But what was shocking was the layout. How deliberately simple everything was. It was clearly designed, as the reports noted, for rapid maintenance by anyone with basic mechanical knowledge.
By anyone. That really jumps out.
That's the absolute key. German mechanics were craftsmen, really, trained to work with incredibly fine tolerances, specialized tools. Their engines were powerful, sure, but high maintenance. They needed experts.
And the Jeep's engine bay is the total opposite.
Completely. They're looking at color-coded wires, components clearly labeled, standard bolts you could find anywhere, not some unique proprietary thing. You could actually reach the parts without taking half the vehicle apart first. It was built for the chaos of the field, not the clean conditions of a factory workshop.
So it wasn't just the parts, it was the whole philosophy behind it.
Right. One senior German mechanic, a guy with decades of experience, he noted that the Americans built it assuming, and this is the critical bit, assuming farm boys and factory workers would be the ones keeping it running, under fire. If something broke, you didn't need a master technician flown in. You needed a standard wrench and a replacement part that was hopefully easy to get and definitely easy to swap out.
It's like German design aimed for the peak, the absolute best performance possible.
While American design aimed for resilience. Keep it running no matter what, maximize uptime, not necessarily peak efficiency. It's a different mindset for a different kind of war.
But hang on, if German engineering was so good, why didn't they think about field maintenance more? Was it just a blind spot? Or did they assume they'd always have enough skilled guys?
I think it was partly a philosophical blind spot, yeah, but also tied to their industrial reality. German industry was built on skilled labor, smaller production runs. They focused on making the best thing, assuming they'd have the skilled hands to maintain it. They probably never really planned for needing millions of, minimally trained conscripts to keep everything going. The Jeep showed the Americans did plan for that, designed for the lowest common skill level to keep things moving.
Okay, that makes sense. Efficiency means different things in total war. Let's compare it directly then. The Germans had the Kübelwagen, right? The Volkswagen Type 82, designed by Porsche, no less.
That's right. And on paper, you look at the Kübelwagen, and it seems pretty impressive.
Yeah, the specs look good. It's lighter than the Jeep.
Much lighter. About 1,540 pounds compared to the Jeep's 2,450, so way better fuel economy. And a huge advantage, especially in extreme climates. It had an air-cooled engine. No radiator to puncture or freeze. That's a smart design choice, you have to admit.
Definitely. So, lighter, more efficient. No vulnerable radiator. Why didn't it become the icon? What was the Kübelwagen's big weakness?
It had one devastating flaw, rooted in its design origins. It was rear-wheel drive only.
Just the back wheels pushing.
Exactly. Porsche based it on a standard sedan platform. Great for roads, maybe, but terrible for where soldiers actually fight. Think about the soft sand in North Africa, the deep mud on the Eastern Front, steep, broken terrain in Italy. Two-wheel drive just couldn't cope reliably. It got stuck a lot.
And that's where the Jeep, despite looking maybe cruder to those German engineers, just shines.
Totally. Those design choices the Germans might have seen as clumsy were actually its strengths in the real world.
Like the four-wheel drive.
Perfect example. In the Jeep, you grab one simple, sturdy lever, clunk, you're in four-wheel drive. Done. The Kübelwagen. If it even had 4WD, which most didn't, it was apparently a more complex operation. The Jeep system was basic, brute force, and incredibly effective. It could just go places the Kübelwagen couldn't dream of.
And the suspension. I remember reading about that contrast, too.
Same story. The Jeep used simple leaf springs. Robust, easy to understand, easy to fix. The Kübelwagen had more sophisticated torsion bars. Better ride on smooth surfaces, probably. But if a torsion bar broke out in the field, especially somewhere remote, you were pretty much stranded. A broken leaf spring on a Jeep, soldiers could patch it up with scrap metal, wood, whatever they could find to keep moving. Field repairability was key.
Okay, and what about the weight? You said the Jeep was almost 1,000 pounds heavier. That sounds inefficient.
From a peacetime engineering perspective, maybe, but that extra 910 pounds, that wasn't just fat, that was toughness. The Jeep was deliberately overbuilt. Its frame, its components, they were designed to take incredible abuse, carry way more than rated capacity, and just keep going. That weight meant durability. The Germans might have seen it as inefficient. The Americans saw it as essential insurance against the realities of war. Reliability under stress trumped optimal specs.
So in the field, the Jeep proved itself tougher, more mobile, easier to fix. But you mentioned earlier, the real eye-opener wasn't just the vehicle itself, it was the numbers.
Exactly. This is where the individual soldier's experience connects to the massive strategic picture. The moment the German high command started seeing the scale of Jeep production, that must have been chilling.
Let's talk about those numbers, because they are staggering. How many Jeeps did America actually build?
During the war, the U.S. produced over 640,000 Jeeps.
600. Wow. Okay. And the Germans, how many Kübelwagons?
Just over 50,000.
50,000. Compared to over 600,000. That's more than 12 Jeeps for every Kübelwagen.
12 to 1. Just think about that. If you're a German logistics officer in, say, 1943, and you learn that statistic, the implications are terrifying.
Yeah.
It's not just about one vehicle being better. It's about being completely overwhelmed.
There's a quote you mentioned from a German supply officer who looked at a captured Jeep. What did he say?
His report was incredibly blunt. He basically said, we build vehicles to achieve engineering perfection. The Americans build them to be manufactured in total war. That sums it up perfectly.
Manufactured in total war. And that meant making sacrifices German engineers probably hated, right? Like that engine block.
Yeah, we touched on that. It was cast, not meticulously machined to superfine tolerances like a German engine might be. Did it cost a tiny bit of optimal performance? Maybe. A few horsepower here or there? Probably. But the payoff was enormous production speed.
Because you didn't need a master craftsman spending days on each block.
Exactly. You could have semi-skilled workers, maybe people who were making something totally different a few months earlier, assembling these engines quickly on a line. And they were still reliable enough. Good enough was the new perfect. German production relied on that base of skilled craftsmen. American production leveraged the assembly line, speed, repetition.
And it wasn't just the engine plants. The whole U.S. economy pivoted. You mentioned the body panels.
Yeah, simple stamped metal. Nothing fancy. And where did they make them? In factories that used to make refrigerators and washing machines, they just converted everything. It was total mobilization.
The scale is hard to grasp. The sources say that by 1942, just U.S. military vehicle production
exceeded the total combined military vehicle production of Germany, Italy, and Japan put together.
That's how you win a war of attrition. It stops being about clever tactics and starts being about sheer industrial might.
Absolutely. And you see the devastating other side of that coin in Germany's own logistics. While the U.S. Army was becoming almost completely motorized.
The Germans were still relying heavily on horses.
Massively. By 1943, estimates suggest around 80% of German divisions still depended on horse-drawn transport for supplies, artillery, everything.
80%. How many horses are we talking about?
Over the course of the war, something like 2.75 million horses were used by the Wehrmacht. Think about the logistics of feeding and caring for them, let alone their speed limitations.
Right. An American motorized column could cover hundreds of kilometers in a day if needed.
While a German supply column, tied to the walking pace of a horse, maybe 30 kilometers on a good day. You just can't sustain rapid advances or react quickly when your supplies move that slowly. The Jeep and the trucks it represented gave the Allies operational legs the Germans simply didn't have.
And the German soldiers, especially the mechanics who ended up as POWs, they saw this difference up close, didn't they, working in American motor pools?
Oh, absolutely. Places like Camp Hearn in Texas, where German POWs worked on U.S. vehicles. The sources talk about their utter astonishment. First, the sheer abundance. Just oceans of vehicles.
There's that story, right? A German mechanic sees a trainload of new Jeeps arrive.
Yeah, and he asks the American guard, sort of awestruck, how long will those last you? And the American apparently just shrugs and says something like, oh, that's just for this week. Yeah. Imagine the psychological impact of that, going from desperately patching up every single vehicle to seeing them treated as almost disposable.
And it wasn't just the numbers, it was the system behind it. Standardization.
That blew their minds, too. They'd pull a bolt off a Jeep and it would fit a standard U.S. Army truck, or a half-track. The American system relied on maybe a few hundred common standardized parts to maintain this vast fleet. The German system, with its focus on specialized vehicles and bespoke components, it needed thousands of different parts. A logistical nightmare.
So the lesson sinks in.
Yeah.
We were beaten not just on the battlefield, but in the factories.
Deeply. As those former mechanics reflected years later, they admitted they had confused peacetime quality with wartime effectiveness. The Jeep wasn't necessarily the best possible vehicle in every single technical aspect, but it was the best vehicle for winning the war, because it was designed perfectly for mass production and brutal field conditions.
The technical manuals are kind of the perfect symbol of this, aren't they?
It's a fantastic comparison. By D-Day, the U.S. Army actually published a detailed manual, TME 9803, specifically for the German Kübelwagen.
Why? So Allied troops could use captured ones.
Exactly. If they captured a Kübelwagen, they wanted their mechanics to be able to figure out its complexities and get it running for Allied use immediately.
Okay. And the Germans. Did they publish a manual for the Jeep?
Nope, never did.
Why not?
Because they didn't need to. The Jeep was so straightforward, so intuitive, any mechanic worth his salt could look at it and figure out how to fix it almost instantly. Its simplicity was its instruction manual.
Wow. That says it all. And this lesson, learned the hard way through defeat, it didn't just disappear after 1945.
Not at all. It became, strangely enough, a cornerstone of the German Wirtschaftswunder, the post-war economic miracle.
How so? Did they just start copying American designs?
Not copying directly, but absorbing the philosophy. When Marshall Plan Aid started rebuilding German industry, the mechanics and engineers who came back, the ones who'd seen the Jeep and the American system up close, they brought that knowledge with them. They started training the next generation differently. The mantra became, essentially, simplicity over sophistication, functionality over perfection, at least designed for mass production.
So German precision wasn't thrown out, but it was combined with this new focus.
Exactly. They studied American methods, intensely standardization, designing parts for easy manufacturing, efficient assembly lines, and they fused that with their own tradition of quality engineering. You see it in companies like BMW, Mercedes-Benz. They learned how to scale production without sacrificing all their precision.
And the ultimate example of that fusion has to be the VW Beetle, right?
Absolutely the perfect example. Engineered with German precision, sure, but it embodied the American lessons learned from the Jeep. It was simple, it was incredibly reliable, it was designed from the ground up to be manufactured cheaply and in enormous quantities. It applied the design for production principle brilliantly to the civilian market.
It's incredible how that wartime lesson echoed through the decades. General George C. Marshall himself called the Jeep America's greatest contribution to modern warfare.
And the veterans, looking back, often boiled it down to that stark math we talked about. We made 50,000 Kübelwagons. They made over 600,000 of them. Sometimes the numbers just tell the whole story.
So the Jeep's true legacy isn't just the vehicle itself, which is iconic, but those underlying principles it represented.
I think so. Standardization, simplification, design for manufacturability. These became global industrial standards. And for Germany, that knowledge wasn't invented in a lab. It came from, as one source put it, humility born from defeat and educated by observation.
A powerful thought to end on. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What assumptions are we making today about sophistication being automatically better? What complex systems do we admire that might be vulnerable to something simpler, more robust, and deployable at massive scale?
That's the enduring question the Jeep leaves us with, I think. Sometimes the most effective solution isn't the most complicated one. Sometimes good enough, when produced in overwhelming numbers, is actually far superior.